This is a collection of Jurassic World Dino Trackers versus Primal Attack, and we're gonna be comparing them against each other. First up is the massive Dino Trackers Indominus Rex figure. This has a fully posable body, and you can use the tail to control the head and chomp the jaw. Let's compare that to the Primal Attack Carnotaurus figure. This is one of my favorite dinosaurs. I love the coloring on it, and on this figure you can use the tail to control the neck and chomp the head too. Next up, let's do the Dino Trackers T-Rex versus the Primal Attack Albertosaurus. First up is the T-Rex in the new tan coloring with the yellow and black striping. It's got this adjustable, pretty detailed headpiece on it. It has the posable body with the legs, the arms, and the tail being movable, and a jaw-chomping attack. And up against that is this slightly smaller Albertosaurus figure from Primal Attack. It has a cool jungle green color with the orange detailing. It's got a bunch of bumps and spikes along the top of its head and along its back too. And you can use the tail to move the head around and chomp the jaw. Next up is the Dino Trackers Stegosaurus versus the Primal Attack Stegosaurus. We'll first check out the Dino Tracker version. This one has a lot more intricate coloring and a lot more variety in the coloring too. And it has two action buttons. The first swings the tail up and down, and the second button here activates the tail to swing side to side. Let's compare that with the Primal Attack version. It's pretty much the exact same shape and size, but it has very different coloring with the gray-blue coloring and the pink underbelly. And this figure only has one attack button hidden on its spine right here. When you press that down, it swings its tail. Next up is the Dino Trackers Bistahevosaur versus another Primal Attack Carnotaurus. First off, the Bistahevosaur is a lot smaller, but I think I actually like the coloring on this figure better. It's got some gray and then the orange specks, the tan, and then more dark gray-blue coloring along its face. And like many Dino Trackers figures, it has two attack buttons. The first activates the jaw, and the second button actually activates the spines on its back. And that's up against this Carnotaurus figure. I believe this is Carnotaurus Toro. It has a much darker coloring compared to the Carnotaurus that we saw earlier, but you can still use the tail to move the head around and chomp the jaw open and shut. Next up, we've got the Primal Attack Siatsmicararum versus the Dino Trackers Nigersaurus. First off is Primal Attack, and this is a really cool looking carnivore figure. It has a really cool color design with this gray striping in the back and then this blue kind of like lightning bolts coming down the sides. I especially love all the spikes that are along its back too. And you can use the tail to chomp the jaw open and shut. And up against that is this herbivore from Dino Trackers. This dinosaur stands on all four legs and has two tones of green. The light green in the front and the dark green in the back. And it has a single action button for the attack. It can move its neck up and down and side to side. For the next one, it's the Primal Attack Sarcosuchus versus the Dino Trackers Regaliceratops. This Sarcosuchus is one intense looking dinosaur. It looks pretty close to a modern crocodile, and it's got some bright orange and red, the dark purple along the top, and then the light blue body. And of course, the tail can move the head around and chomp the jaw open and shut. And here is the Regaliceratops from Dino Trackers. It has a much brighter body with this yellow coloring with some purple and green. It's got a ton of super tall spikes on its back. And this figure has the single action button on its back for the attack and the sound effects. Over here is a Baryonyx from Primal Attack versus this Irritator figure from the Dino Tracker series. This Baryonyx figure, I think it actually might be Baryonyx Grim. It's got some pretty cool coloring with the two tones of green, this yellow coloring, and then the tan body. And like many of the other Primal Attack figures, you can move the tail to move the head around, and there's sound effects too. And up against that is this Irritator dinosaur, which in my opinion looks even more fierce. It's got tons of cool coloring, shorter legs than normal for these types of dinosaurs, a huge spine on its tail that goes all the way up its back, and the single action button for the chomping and sound effects. Here is the Dino Trackers Orcoraptor versus the Primal Attack Carcharodontosaurus. First up, the Orcoraptor is a bit darker in color. It's got this dark green kind of jungle color and then the black along the back of its body. And it has a single action button for the sound effects and the chomping. versus this Carnotaurus figure in this bright tan coloring with the brown and orange striping from its back all the way up to its head. And it looks like this figure also has a single action button that activates the chomping. I don't think there's any sound effects on this one though. Here is the Dino Trackers Sinotyrannus figure versus the Primal Attack Sinoceratops. We'll first check out the Sinotyrannus figure. It's got those two tones of green, very similar to some of the other Dino Tracker figures, but it also has this bright red detailing along its face. And this figure has two action buttons. The first activates the tail swinging back and forth, and the second activates the jaw chomping. But interestingly, this is another one of the figures that doesn't have any sound effects built in. And that's versus this Sinoceratops figure, a much more neutral color with this gray and then this light tan and yellow coloring on its body. But on this figure, you can actually move the tail around to move the head alongside with the sound effects. I've got another Sarcosuchus figure from Primal Attack here versus this Dino Trackers Gigant Spinosaurus. From Primal Attack, this Sarcosuchus is very similar to the one that we saw earlier. Other than that, it has very different coloring with the jungle green coloring underneath and then the bright red on the top of its body. And this Gigant Spinosaurus is a whole lot smaller, but it looks kind of like a Stegosaurus with these spines on the top of its back. But of course, it has these huge spikes running out of its shoulders that are very different from a Stegosaurus. Next up is the Primal Attack Tarbosaurus versus the Dino Trackers Endoraptor. The Tarbosaurus has a very dark gray coloring. You can see a bunch of darker gray striping along its body. I love these huge spikes running along its entire spine, and I love the bright red coloring on its neck and on its chin too. And on this figure, the tail can move the head back and forth and chomp the jaw, but no sound effects, sadly. And now this Endoraptor figure is super reflective. It's got a blue reflective coloring over its whole body. I'd say it's a decent amount larger than the Tarbosaurus, and it has sound effects and attacks. You can activate them by moving the arms or by pressing this button on its back. This is the Dino Trackers Dryptosaurus versus the Primal Attack Majingasaurus. I think the Dryptosaurus has a ton more spikes than the Majingasaurus. It's got some on its head, on its back, and a ton on its tail. Check that out. And it has an attack button on its back for the chomping and sound effects. And the Majingasaurus is a little bit smaller, but it's got much brighter coloring with this green, yellow, and blue. And of course, you can move the tail around to get a really lifelike action, although it doesn't have an attack button to open and close the jaw. You have to do that manually. Over here, I've got the Primal Attack Kentrosaurus versus the Dino Trackers Diabloceratops. Now, the Kentrosaurus is pretty similar to a Stegosaurus. You can tell by these huge spines running down its back and that it stands on all four legs. But this figure has these spikes coming out of the sides of its stomach, no doubt for defense. And you'll notice that the spikes on its tail are a whole lot larger than a Stegosaurus's usually are. And it's actually got an action button on its back to swing those front spikes back and forth. And now it's time for the Diabloceratops, one of the coolest colored dinosaur figures from the Dino Trackers series. Check out this super bright red. That is super cool looking. And of course, it's got a massive frill on its head alongside these four huge horns. And there's an action button on its back for the attack and the sound effects. Next is the Primal Attack Edmontosaurus versus the Dino Trackers Eocarcharia. The Edmontosaurus, I believe, is an herbivore, and it's standing on all four legs, but it has some pretty cool coloring with this bright blue and the yellow on its face, and you can move the tail to move the head around. And then the Eocarcharia is definitely a whole lot scarier looking. Check out all this feather texturing over its entire body. Plus, it's pretty cool that they painted that red right around the eyes and on top of the head too. And check out this action button on its back for the chomping and sound effects. And finally, it's the Dino Trackers Pyroraptor figure versus the Primal Attack Ceratosaurus. Now, this Pyroraptor from Dino Trackers is definitely the smaller of the two, but I think it has the coolest coloring with this super bright yellow and then the blue along the rest of its body. Plus, it's got a bunch of feather texturing, although sadly, it does not have any attack feature. And here's the Primal Attack Ceratosaurus, a whole lot larger in size, although the coloring isn't quite as impressive with the red in the front and then the tan with a little bit of black detailing. But the best part is that this figure does have an attack button that you can press for the chomping and sound effects. This first figure, however, is not from Dino Trackers. This is actually part of the 30th anniversary Jurassic Park collection. This is the real feel T-Rex figure designed to look like the old Jurassic Park one. The skin on its body is soft and rubbery, and it actually can eat smaller dinosaurs and store them in its stomach compartment. Next up is the Dino Trackers Endoraptor figure. This version is slightly larger than many of my other Endoraptor figures, and it has some roaring actions with its arms, and it has an action button on its back too. Here is the Epic Attack Carnotaurus figure. It's around the same size as many of my other Carnotaurus figures, and it features the red body with the brown top and a single action button on its back to operate its jaw. But best of all, there's these action buttons on its side for more sound effects and lights too. Here is the Dino Trackers Diabloceratops figure. It comes in a bright red coloring over all its body and has some massive horns, and it has an action on its back to swing its head back and forth. Next up is the Dino Trackers Sinotyrannus figure. It comes with this cool headset that you can take off of the dinosaur figure, and it has some pretty cool coloring, and it has two buttons. One activates its head, and the other button activates its tail. Right over here is the Dino Trackers Eocarcharia. This dinosaur has feather texturing over all its body. It's got some pretty bright coloring and the bright red along its face, and an action on its back to swing its head back and forth. This is the Gigantic Trackers Stegosaurus figure. It has some really cool coloring over all of its body. It's quite different from all the other Stegosaurus figures that I have. And of course it comes with the tracker backpack and two action buttons on its back. One swings its tail up and down, and the other swings it side to side. Here is the Dino Trackers Nigersaurus figure. This dinosaur stands on all four legs and has some pretty bright green on the front and darker green in the back. And there's one single action button on its back to move its head back and forth. Here's our first aquatic dinosaur of the collection. This is the Kronosaurus. It has the dark blue top and the yellow underbelly, and you can adjust all its fins and its tail too, and it has a single action on its back to operate its jaw. Next up is the Edaphosaurus figure. It looks pretty similar to a Dimetrodon with a huge spine on its back and standing on all four legs, but its spine is even a bit larger than a Dimetrodon's, and with this figure you can use the tail to move the head back and forth. Alright, now it's time for some ones that I haven't even opened up yet. This is the Orcoraptor figure. This is a pretty bulky looking figure. You can see that it has some feather texturing along the underside of its body, but not really along the top. You can tell that it's kind of a skin texture. And kind of like the Therizinosaurus, it has these huge claws on its hands. It's got some pretty bright accenting design on its tail, but not really anywhere else, which is interesting. But there is some right around its eyes too. And it looks like the arms, the legs, and the tail are adjustable, and there's an action button on its back to operate its jaw. Next up of the unopened figures is this Irritator figure. I think I have one or two other Irritator figures, so I'm excited to add this to my collection. Alright, here it is, and I gotta say, it looks even a bit different compared to my other Irritator figures. Its legs seem to be a lot shorter, whereas its body is super long. It has this really long tail, and of course it still has the spine that runs from its back down its tail, and it has some pretty cool coloring too, with the dark brown in the back and on its legs, the orange in the middle, and then some bright green along its head and its neck too. And it looks like its arms and its legs and its tail are adjustable, and there's that single action button on its back to operate its jaw. And the next unopened figure is this Regaloceratops. Let's go ahead and open it up and check it out. So obviously it looks quite a bit like a Triceratops. It stands on all four legs, it's got the horns on the front, as well as these additional horns along the top of its frill, and it's even got some spikes running down its back and its tail too. This is a pretty bright dinosaur as well. Most of it is that yellow color, it has some green along its face and along its back, and it looks like all four legs are adjustable. You can twist the tail around a bit, and it has an action button on its back for roar sound effects. Up next is the Dino Tracker's Dryptosaurus figure. It has fairly dark coloring with the dark brown over most of its body and then the green accenting on its arms and on its tail as well. And boy, does this figure have tons of spikes along its body. And there's the action button to control the jaw and the sound effects. Over here is the Hammond Collection Baryonyx figure. It features a fully posable body on all of its limbs and has the classic blue coloring with the white stripe and the gray underbelly. Here's another Hammond Collection figure. This is the Concavinator. It too has a fully posable body with all of its limbs, and it features some pretty cool coloring with some bright orange along parts of it, the dark blue, the lighter underbelly, and some cool detailing around its eyes. Here is the Dino Tracker's Zuniceratops figure. This version of the Zuniceratops has the brown body with some tan and black along its neck and an action button to activate its head. This next Dino Trackers figure, I believe, is called the Elaphrosaurus. It features a bright blue body with some yellow accenting along the side and a darker face with some horns on the top, and it looks like its whole body is adjustable as well. The arms, the legs, the tail, the neck, and the jaw. Here is the Dino Trackers Herrerasaurus figure, and this Herrerasaurus looks quite a bit different compared to the older versions by Jurassic World. It features posable arms, legs, and tail, and an action button on its back for the chomping. This next figure is the Dino Tracker's Austroraptor. This version features the tan body with some brown detailing and some brighter coloring around its head. And overall, it's shaped like a velociraptor, but the biggest difference is the shape of its head and its jaw. Here is the Dino Tracker's Strike Attack Gigant Spinosaurus. This figure looks kind of like a Miragaia with the spines along its back and the huge spikes coming out of its shoulders, but it has a different shaped head, and this one has the orange coloring in the front and the tan in the back. Plus it has an action that when you move its head back and forth, it moves its tail too. Next up is the Dino Tracker's Strike Attack Dilophosaurus figure. This figure has very muted colors. It only has white, some black as well, and I think that's pretty much it. But it still has this really cool feature that when you move its tail, it activates its frills. Now here is the Hammond Collection Dilophosaurus figure. It looks quite a bit different compared to the Strike Attack figure that we just saw, but this figure is actually pretty cool because you can actually remove the frill to reveal just the head by itself, which apparently is a more realistic look for the Dilophosaurus in real life. Back here is the Hammond Collection Ceratosaurus figure. It features the fully posable body, has some pretty cool coloring over its whole body, and of course has the little horn on the top of its head. Here is the Dino Tracker's Baby Brachiosaurus figure. I have a few other versions of this figure, and this one is in the brown coloring with the tan accenting along its back. Here is the Epic Attack Dilophosaurus figure, a little bit larger than many of my other Dilophosauruses. And interestingly, on this figure, you can't move the frills at all, but there is this action button on its side to activate some sounds and some light effects. Looks like here's another Zuniceratops figure from Dino Trackers. We've seen this one already. This one from Dino Trackers, I believe, is called Geniodectes cirrus. Features some bright coloring with the yellow that runs from its tail through its underbelly up to its face, and then the brown along the rest of its body. And it has an action button on its back to operate the jaw. Next up is a miniature Hammond Collection Velociraptor figure. It of course is extremely posable all over its body. It has a single stripe that runs down its entire side, and it's got some cool blue coloring right around its eyes too. And finally, here is the Dino Trackers Strike Attack Atrociraptor figure. This Atrociraptor has some bright yellow along the front, and then the back is a dark green color. It's also got some reflective silver coloring right around its eyes, and a single action button on its back to operate its head. First up, we've got the Extreme Chompin' Tyrannosaurus Rex figure. It's a medium-sized T-Rex figure, and of course it has the button on the top of its head for chomping. Next up is the Primal Attack Control and Conquer Carnotaurus figure. It's got a bright orange-red body, and it has a chomping action as well as a head-moving action. Here is the epic Roarin' Tyrannosaurus Rex figure, and it's one of my favorites. It's quite a lot larger than the T-Rex that we just saw. It's got a light brown body with the dark brown on top, and you can use the tail to control the head and open and close the jaw. This next ginormous figure is the Destroy and Devour Indominus Rex. This figure's even bigger than the T-Rex figures that we've seen, and it has two actions. First, it has an arm attack, and it has a roaring jaw action. And now let's grab this huge aquatic dinosaur. This is the Real Feel Mosasaurus figure. This dinosaur was one of the stars of the first Jurassic World movie, and you can open and close its jaw, move its fins, and as you can tell from the name, it has a much more lifelike feel than many of the other figures. It's a bit softer. Up next is the Bite and Fight Tyrannosaurus Rex figure. Now this T-Rex may look similar to the previous ones, but it has a totally different attack. It has a tear-in attack with its mouth. See how its neck twists all the way to the side? And it also has a secondary button for swinging the tail back and forth too. This figure is really wild. This is the Primal Attack Massive Biters Tarbosaurus. It's got a ton of crazy spines running all the way up from its head to its tail. It has some pretty cool coloring. I like how it's subtle along its body and then bright red along its neck. And it has a jaw chomping action too. This figure is another Primal Attack Massive Biters figure. This is the Seats Micorarum, and it's got some pretty crazy coloring and details. Check out all those little spikes right on the top of its head and on its back. And of course it has some super bright orange and blue coloring too. And best of all, it has a jaw chomping action as well. Up next is the Primal Attack Control and Conquer Carnotaurus Toro figure. It has a dark brown body, a lot darker than the Carnotaurus that we saw earlier, and it has the jaw chomping action and the head moving action too. This is another massive biters from the Primal Attack series. This is the Albertosaurus figure. This figure is pretty recognizable because of the green all over the body with the orange stripe on both sides. And of course, it has the jaw chomping action and the head moving action too. Also from the Massive Biters toy line is this Sarcosuchus figure. This figure is really long. It's probably around a foot in length. It's got all sorts of texturing and detailing. You can see 2 rows of spikes right on its back that go all the way down its tail. And of course, it has a long and narrow snout, very similar to an alligator's, and it has the jaw chomping action too. Here is the Primal Attack Sound Strike Majungasaurus. And as you can hear, it comes with sound effects, although it seems to be a little bit broken at the moment. This is a bit smaller of a figure, but it still has some really cool coloring and tons of little spikes and details all over its body. And while there's no button to open and close the jaw on this figure, you can use the tail to move the head around. Up next is the Primal Attack Sound Strike Irritator. This figure has a similar body shape to a Baryonyx, although it does have a little spine that runs down its back. And on this figure, there's no button to open and close the mouth, but you can use the tail to move the head around. And check out those sound effects too. Here's another Primal Attack Sound Strike figure. This is the Sinoceratops. And this figure comes in the light gray with some tan detailing. The coolest coloring and detailing is this bright orange and yellow along its face and the super black eyes. And this figure has a head attack action. check that out, and sound effects too. Next up for Primal Attack is this Soundstrike Parasaurolophus figure. It is bright yellow, it has some reflective pink along its back and its legs, and the best part is that it has a head attack action. Also from the Soundstrike series is this Pteranodon figure. This version is in the dark orange and maroon coloring along its wings, and it has two action buttons, one to operate the mouth with sound effects, and the other button to operate the wings. Here is the Primal Attack Soundstrike Cryolophosaurus figure. There are other versions of this dinosaur, but this one is in the bright yellow, brown, and orange coloring, and there is no button to open and close the mouth, but you can use the tail for a head attack action. Here's another Pteranodon figure from Primal Attack. This one has some even cooler coloring, I think. While it's mostly brown, it has some really cool green striping along its wings and a darker green coloring along its face. And just like the other Pteranodon figure, there's one button to operate the mouth and another button to flap the wings. Here is the Primal Attack Edmontosaurus figure. This figure stands on all four legs. It's got some light tan and dark green-blue coloring, with the brightest coloring along its face. And like many other figures, this comes with a head attack feature. Now here is a Savage Strike figure. This is the Styracosaurus. It's a pretty small figure. This version comes with the light green and brown with the bright orange and yellow detailing along the face. And this figure has a head thrash attack that you activate by pressing on the tail. Up next is the Pachycephalosaurus figure from Savage Strike. It's colored bright green on the underbelly and orange along the rest of the body, and it has a head ramming action that you activate by pressing on the tail. Up next is a Velociraptor figure from the Attack Pack series. It's dark blue with some red detailing along the top, and it has a fully posable body. From the Savage Strike series is this Velociraptor Charlie figure. It's bright green and has some darker green along the top, and the coolest part of all is that this figure has a claw slashing action by pressing this button on the top. Check it out, here's another Velociraptor figure from the Savage Strike series. This is Velociraptor Delta. This Velociraptor is colored a much more dark blue-green color, but just like the other figure, it has a button on its back for the claw slashing action. Over here I've got two different Stygimoloch figures. This one is from Jurassic World, and this one is from Camp Cretaceous, both from the Savage Strike toy line. They've got quite a bit of different coloring along their whole body, but they both still have that super hard shelled head for headbutting with the spikes right along the back. And both these figures have a head ramming action when you press down on the tail. Next up from Camp Cretaceous Savage Strike is this Plesiosaurus figure. It is way smaller than the Mosasaurus figure that we saw earlier. It's got a much longer neck and a mouth that you can open manually, and there is a button on its back to move the flippers up and down. Here is a wild-looking winged dinosaur. This is the Tapehara from the Savage Strike series. It's got some crazy cool coloring and texture detailing along its wings, and a super bright head and frill right on the top of its head. Plus, there's a tiny little button on its back to flip the wings up and down. I've got two other winged dinosaurs. These two are from the Attack Pack, and I believe they are called the Rhamphorhynchus dinosaur. One of them's a bright green color with some darker green on the body, and the other figure has some white, dark blue, and orange. And both of them have a super long and narrow snout with tons of huge teeth inside. This is the Sauropelta figure from the Savage Strike series. It's got a fully armored body all over, and it's got tons of spikes along its shoulders, and it has a spring-loaded spike attack action. Next up is a Dilophosaurus figure from the Savage Strike series. This figure features the giant frill right beside its head and an attack button when you press down on the tail. Here is the Minmi figure from the Attack Pack series. Like the Sauropelta, it has a fully armored body, and it's got spikes all over its back instead of the large ones on its shoulders. This next figure is from the Attack Pack series too. This is the Troodon. It's got a pretty small body, it has an interesting spine running along its back, and on the top of its head too. Here is a Dimorphodon figure from the Attack Pack series. It has bright orange and red on the underside of its wings, while the rest of its body is a dark green color, and you can manually open and close the mouth too. Next from the Attack Pack is this Herrerasaurus figure. It's got some pretty bright coloring with the soft green and darker green and light blue coloring right along the top, and this figure is fully posable too. Also part of the Attack Pack series is this bright green Dracorex. There's some gray striping along its back and on its legs, and it's got tons of spikes along the back of its head. This is the Calavosaurus figure from the Attack Pack series. It stands on all 4 legs and has 3 different colors. It's got bright orange on the top, some light blue along the tail, and the rest of its body is a dark blue color, except for its mouth, which is bright blue again. And finally, from the Attack Pack series is this tiny little Ornithosceles figure. Most of its body is a dark brown color. It has some yellow detailing along the top with the gray underbelly. This dinosaur really looks like it could run fast. Let's get started with the Dino Trackers, because those are the newest figures. This first one is the Diabloceratops. It's got some crazy horns in the front and some unique dark red coloring. Plus it has an action button on its back to move its head back and forth. This is from the Gigantic Tracker series. This is the Stegosaurus. It's got some pretty bright coloring all over its body. You can see there's all sorts of little specks of different color in there as well. And it comes with this awesome Dino Tracker backpack. And it has 2 action buttons. One swings the tail up and down, and the other swings the tail back and forth. Next up is another gigantic tracker. This is the Sinotyrannus. It's got a dark green body with some red detailing on its tail, on its neck, and on its head. It comes with these interesting binocular light type of things. And it has 2 action buttons on its back. One moves its head, and the other moves its tail. Next up is the Track and Attack Endoraptor. This is one of the newest Endoraptors released. If you pull on its arms, it moves its head. And it has a button on its back to open its mouth. Check out that awesome reflective blue coloring too. Here we've got the Dryptosaurus from the Dino Trackers series. This figure is mostly darker in colors, but it does have tons of spikes along its body, and it has a dual action button on its back that you can use to move its head back and forth. This is the Carnotaurus from the Dino Trackers series. It is an aquatic dinosaur, so it's got 4 fins, and this figure also has the dual action button on its back to move its head back and forth. And next up for the Dino Trackers, we have the Austroraptor figure. So this figure is in the same family as a Velociraptor, but you can see it has a much longer and narrower snout. And on this figure, you can adjust the tail, the legs, the arms, the neck, and the mouth. All right, let's check out this new Dino Trackers set that I'm adding to my collection. This is the Search and Smash Truck set. Let's first check out this Atrociraptor. It's about the same size as some of the other mini Atrociraptor figures that I have. It's got some pretty unique coloring though. It's got some bright red orange coloring along the front, while the rest of its body is a soft tan color with a little bit of black on the top. And this set actually comes with a tracker that you can put right on to the Atrociraptor. Check that out, it's pretty cool. This set also comes with a soldier who's got a brown vest and also a weapon. And the biggest part of all is this Jeep. And it has a special feature where you can press down on the hood and it'll actually capsize. And next up from the Dino Trackers is the Elaphrosaurus. This figure's got some soft blue coloring with some green detailing, and it's got a real mean looking face. All right, moving on to the Roar Attack series, we've got the Baryonyx Chaos figure. This figure has some bright blue detailing along the top of its head and a slide lever action for the sound effects and chomping action. Here is our first Allosaurus figure. This figure has the brown body with the blue detailing along the top. It's got some little spikes running down its spine, and it's got the slide lever action on its back for the roaring and sound effects. Next up from Roar Attack is this Ceratosaurus figure. It's a bit smaller than the Allosaurus figure. It's got the red and black coloring along the top, and of course the slide lever action for the chomping and the roar sound effects. This next figure is actually a Mega Destroyer figure. This is the Carnotaurus. It's got an action button right on its back for the chomping. And you can move its arms, its legs, and its tail too. Here's another Mega Destroyer Carnotaurus. It's pretty much the same aside from this awesome coloring. It's got the blue and the orange and brown, and of course the action button on its back for chomping. Here is the next Roar Attack Allosaurus. This one has the dark green, white, and red. And you can move its arms, its legs, and its tail, and it has the slide lever button on its back to activate the sound effects. Here is another Mega Destroyer. This is the Pentaceratops, and this figure is quite large. It's got the soft brown body with the gray detailing and two action buttons. The first moves its head up and down, and the second swivels its entire torso back and forth. And these are probably some of the largest horns that I've seen. This is the Roar Attack Kentrosaurus. It's got spikes all over its body, but the coolest part are these huge spikes coming right out of the side. And you can actually swing those spikes back and forth using this slide lever action. This is the Mega Destroyer Stegosaurus figure with the camouflage green, tan, and brown coloring. And it's got the hidden action button that you can press to swing its entire torso and its tail back and forth. And those are some pretty long spikes too. This is the Ceratosaurus figure with the dark green and black coloring. It's got the tiny little horn on its head, and there's a slide lever action for the chomping and sound effects. This one's an interesting looking dinosaur. This is the Oranosaurus from Roar Attack. It's got a huge spine running along its back and a slide lever action on its side to move the head up and down. This next figure is Ankylosaurus Bumpy. It's got the huge shell on its back, the spikes coming off the side, and a slide lever action to swing its tail back and forth. And last of all, we've got Baryonyx Limbo in the green, dark green, and brown coloring. You can move its arms, its legs, and its tail, and you can use the slide lever action to open and close its mouth. Let's start it off with this gigantic Giganotosaurus figure. This is one of the largest Giganotosauruses that I currently have. And this figure has some really cool attack features. First is with this button on the top that swings its entire torso back and forth. There's also a button on the bottom of its tail to activate just the jaw by itself. Next, this T-Rex has one of my favorite special features. It actually can break free from its cage that's around its face. By pressing the button on its back, it breaks free and roars at the same time. That is super cool. This dinosaur is our first extreme battle damage dinosaur. This is an Allosaurus, and it is part of the Jurassic World Dominion series. You can check out that huge battle damage on the side that you can open up to reveal what's underneath and close it up all the way as well. This is a really cool and huge figure. Next, we've got a really interesting T-Rex figure right here. This one is all disassembled. You can see all the insides of this Tyrannosaurus Rex. You can see the muscle of its tail, you can see the intestines, and you can actually lift it up to show even more underneath. Plus, you can actually reassemble it so it looks like a normal T-Rex. I think the legs and the tail are in this bin somewhere, so we'll probably see them in a little bit. Let's check out this other giant T-Rex figure right here. This is camouflage custom colored. And I really like this figure because of the attack features. You can use its tail for a chomping action, chomps downward, or you can lift the tail down and it lifts its head up for a roar. That is super cool, and I think these features make it look really lifelike. Next up, we've got the extreme battle damage Indominus Rex, and it looks like he's chomping on a little Spinosaurus figure. That's pretty cool. But let's check out that extreme battle damage on the side. You can turn it on and turn it off just with the click of a button. Plus, there's a button on its tail for chomping and roaring. This Indominus Rex's arms are huge as well, and check out the size of those claws. Over here, we've got an Albertosaurus figure with extreme battle damage on the side. Plus, it's got some on its skin as well. And just like the Allosaurus that we saw earlier, you can flip down the rib cage, you can see the stomach underneath, or you can close it all completely and hide the battle damage entirely. Next up, we've got a Scorpius Rex figure, and this has some really cool attack features. The first button on its back activates the jaw with sound effects, which is pretty cool, but it also has a second button for the claw slashing action, which I think is really cool. And that's not all. The tail is actually spring-loaded, so you can swing it back and forth to hit other dinosaurs with that poisonous quills. The next special featured dinosaur is this giant Pentaceratops figure. And just like the T-Rex that we saw earlier, it can break free from its cage by pressing a button on its back. Let's check that out. Ready, 3, 2, 1, go! Wow, that is so cool. And there's also a second button to swivel its torso back and forth too. Up next, I've actually just bought this new one to show in this video. This is the Jurassic World Dominion Extreme Damage Atrociraptor. I have quite a few other dinosaurs from this series, so I'm super excited to add a new Atrociraptor to them. So let's check out this battle damage on the side. Check that out. You can reveal it just by the click of a button, and it shows on both sides. Next, we've got another giant T-Rex figure with extreme battle damage on both sides, just like the Atrociraptor that we just saw. You can click it on and off. It's really cool, plus the rest of its body is fully posable. You can even open its mouth all the way for a giant roar. Up next, we've got an unusual looking dinosaur. This is an Ankylosaurus, and this one has a pretty cool moving feature that's really lifelike, I think. You can use its tail to move its neck around to look in all different directions, plus there's a button to even open and close its jaw too. So this feature gives this dinosaur some super lifelike movements. Next, we've got a giant Endoraptor figure. This figure has the classic coloring for an Endoraptor. You can use the tail to move the neck and the head around, and even some of the torso too. And there's two buttons on its tail. The first one moves its arms, and the second button at the bottom of its tail opens and closes its jaw. So you can use all three of these all together to make it look really lifelike. Here is a new Sinoceratops from the Jurassic World Dominion movie. This dinosaur has some really cool coloring, but the special feature is when you press down on its body, it lifts its head up, and it has a ton of sound effects too. Right over here, we've got the Jurassic World Dominion Extreme Battle Damage T-Rex. So this figure is similar to the T-Rex that we saw earlier with the battle damage on its side that you can turn on and off on both sides, but it has entirely different coloring. It's a lot more orange, and it has some gray on the top as well. Next, looks like we've got a Pteranodon figure. This figure is ginormous. It's probably a foot from wingtip to wingtip, and it has two special feature buttons on its back. As you can hear, the first one activates the sound effects and also flaps its wings. And the second button in the front activates its jaw and more sound effects too. I really like how big this figure is, plus you can get some real lifelike wing flapping too. Over here, we've got another Pteranodon figure, but this one is actually from the Hammond collection. And the special feature of this dinosaur is that it is a soft, rubbery texture, as opposed to a hard plastic like many of the figures. So this figure is really poseable, especially because of that rubber feeling that makes it feel like a real wing would. All right, here are our missing T-Rex parts. So let's actually go ahead and put them on to our T-Rex right here. All right, well, it looks like I'm missing a few pieces here still, but you eventually would be able to reassemble it to make it look entirely like a healthy T-Rex. Next up, we've got the Tyrannosaurus figure. And the special feature on this dinosaur is this slide lever action that moves its neck and gives a ton of different sound effects. Up next, I've got a little baby Triceratops with the battle damage that you can open and close on the side. Here's also a small Herrerasaurus figure with that same opening and closing battle damage on the side. This, I think, is the first Velociraptor of this bin, and the special feature on this dinosaur is the side-to-side slashing action. It is spring-loaded, so you can twist it, and it swings way back and forth. Here's another Herrerasaurus figure, but this figure does not have battle damage, but rather you can use the tail to open and close the mouth. And for how small the figure is, that's a pretty cool feature. And here we've got another Velociraptor figure, but this one has the extreme battle damage on the side that you can turn on and off. And it shows up on both sides too. First up, we've got a ginormous Spinosaurus figure. This is the Camp Cretaceous Spinosaurus with the brown body and red along its spine and face, and it's got the action button on its head for the chomping and roaring. Next up, we've got the Terran T-Rex. This T-Rex has a really cool ability. When you press down on this button, it does a tearing action. Look at that, it's like tearing away some meat. That's really cool. And it comes with a second action button to swing the tail. Next up, we've got a big old Therizinosaurus figure, just like in the Jurassic World Dominion movie. It's got the red stripe down its back all the way to the top of its head, and this figure has some special features as well. There is a button on its tail to activate the jaw and the neck, and you can use the tail to swivel the torso back and forth. Plus, check out those huge claws. Next dinosaur is the Stomp and Escape T-Rex. This figure has a light brown body with gray detailing. It has one button on the top of its back for the roaring and chomping. And the tail, when you twist it, stomps its feet. Some pretty cool sound effects that come with it too. Next up, we've got a big old Carnotaurus figure. This has a light red or orange coloring along most of its body. It's got the gray underbelly and the brown top, and tons of little bumps along its back, as well as the two horns on the top of its head. And this figure has an action button for the chomping, and you can use the tail to move the head around too. Here's another T-Rex that I bought just recently. This is the new Extreme Battle Damage T-Rex. Check it out, there's a button on its back that you can use to activate the battle damage on the side. That's pretty cool. And the rest of the figure is fully posable as well. Here is another ginormous T-Rex in the back. This one is camo colored, and I believe it's custom colored. That was done a long time ago. And this figure has a few actions that you can do with the tail. You can move the tail up, and it does a roaring pose. And you can move the tail down, and it does a chomping action. This dinosaur is a Baryonyx. It's got the light green coloring and the light brown and dark brown along the top. And it's got an action button on its back for the chomping. Right over here is an Albertosaurus. This figure is medium sized. It's got the dark green coloring along its body and that red maroon color all the way along the top of its head. And this Albertosaurus actually has the battle damage, both on its leg and the battle damage that you can open and close on its side. And you can even bring the rib cage up and down to reveal the stomach inside. Here is another Baryonyx figure. This one is light gray with blue and light green coloring and a little bit of white along the side. And it has the slide lever action to activate the roaring sound effects and the jaw too. Here's another Baryonyx figure. This one has light green coloring along with some darker green along the top and on its legs, and the darker brown along its neck and the top of its head too. This Baryonyx figure also has the slide lever action that you can use for the sound effects and the chomping. This is the Majingasaurus figure. It's a bit smaller. It's got the dark green coloring with the yellow and bright blue detailing along the sides. It has teeny tiny arms that are adjustable, and you can use the tail to move the neck and head around. Let's see what we got next up. This is a Carnotaurus figure. It has the dark blue coloring with the yellow and brown detailing along the top. The arms, legs, and tail are fully adjustable, and there's a button on its back for the chomping. Here is a Cryolophosaurus figure. This one has some really cool crowning along the top of its head in that bright orange color, while the rest of its body is yellow and brown along the top. With this figure, you can use the tail to control the head as well. Here is another Baryonyx figure. This one has some bright orange coloring right along the top of its head though. And of course, it's got the button on its back to activate the jaw. Next up, we've got a dark red Carnotaurus figure. This dinosaur has the light underbelly and some purple detailing along the top of its body. And it is very textured. You can see those bumps and ridges all over everywhere. And of course, it's got the huge horns at the top of its head, plus an action button to activate the chomping. Next up, we've got a super bright yellow Suchomimus figure. This dinosaur has the brown detailing along the top. It's got that spine all the way from its head, all the way down almost to the end of its tail. And this figure has two action buttons. The first is for the jaw and the chomping, and the second action button activates the tail for swinging around. This dinosaur is a Metriacanthosaurus. It's a bit smaller than the other figures. It's got the dark red coloring with some darker detailing along the top, and the bright yellow-orange coloring right along its head. And of course, it's got an action button on its back to activate the jaw. I've got another Suchomimus figure. This one is a dark blue color with some bright yellow detailing along the top and along that spine that goes all the way to its tail. These Suchomimuses have really long and narrow snouts, still full of teeth though, and there is an action button on its back to activate the chomping. Next up is another Carcharodontosaurus figure. This one is tan in color with the brown and orange detailing along the top, and it's got all these little spikes right along its spine, running all the way down to the tail. That's pretty interesting. And this figure has an action button that activates the jaw once again. That's pretty cool. Here we've got an Allosaurus figure with the light tan coloring along the underbelly and the sides, and the darker blue along the top of its back all the way to the top of its head. This figure also has the slide lever action for a bunch of different sound effects and chomping actions. Over here we've got a big Dilophosaurus figure in the bright red coloring along with the green, brown, and red along its frills, and that super bright yellow crown on the top of its head too. This figure is pretty basic though, so it doesn't have any action buttons, but you can still move the arms, the legs, and the tail, as well as move the frills back and forth. Here is a basic Spinosaurus figure. This one is a lot smaller than the Spinosaurus that we saw at the beginning of this video, and this one has the dark green coloring, but still has the iconic red spine and the red around the eyes as well. And on this figure, you can't open and close the jaw, but you can just move the arms, the legs, and the tail. Next up, we've got a huge Carnotaurus figure. This one has some darker red, basically brown coloring along the side. It has a dark gray underbelly and the black along the top. And this figure has a few actions too. The tail actually controls the head, so you can swing that around and up and down, and there's a button on the tail to activate the jaw too. Here is another Cryolophosaurus figure. This one is a dark blue color. It's got the light underbelly and some white detailing on the sides, and then a bunch of red along its back and on the crown on the top of its head too. And just like the other one that we saw, you can use the tail to control the neck. Here is the Baryonyx from the Hammond collection. This Baryonyx is way more adjustable than a lot of figures that you'll see in here. Check that out. You can move its elbows and its arms, all over on its legs. It's pretty realistic with its movement, and it's got a bit more texturing than a lot of the other Baryonyx figures that I have. Looks like we've got some mini Dilophosaurus figures in here. This first one is a soft purple color, and it's got some yellow, orange, and red on its frills. Looking pretty scary. And I've also got this soft green Dilophosaurus that's also got some orange and some yellow on it. And this one actually has an action that when you move the tail, it springs the frills up. That's really cool. Here is the Irritator figure. Most of this figure is dark brown. It's got a little bit of the light underbelly, and it's got some cool dark blue and light blue detailing all along its spine, all the way to the top of its head. And check out that super long mouth with all those teeth. All right, looks like we got another giant Dilophosaurus figure in here. This one is green and has red frills and the red crown. And just like the other one, you can open and close the frills, as well as move the arms, legs, and the tail too. Next up, I believe that this is the Roarivore Allosaurus. This dinosaur is gray all along its body and has the yellow detailing right along the top of its body, all the way to the tip of its head. Here is another Metriacanthosaurus figure. This one is a dark mustard yellow along most of its body and underbelly, and it's got that dark green detailing along the top of its back all the way to its head. And it has an action button on its back for chomping the jaw. We've got another Albertosaurus figure in here. This one does not have the battle damage on its side though. It's got the bright orange detailing on its side all the way up to its eyes, while the rest of its body is a dark green color. This figure has an action where you can move the tail to control the head, as well as press the button on its tail to activate the jaw too. Check it out, another Baryonyx figure. This one has the bright reflective blue coloring on the top of its head, while the rest of its body is a soft brown color and a dark gray blue detailing along the top. And it's got the action button on its back for the jaw. Looks like we've got a few Monolophosaurus figures in here as well. This first one is a brown color with gray detailing, and it's pretty adjustable. It's a pretty small figure though. This other Monolophosaurus figure actually has some battle damage on the side that you can open and close, and is fairly adjustable as well. And this final one is a dark green color, has some yellow detailing and that bright red detailing, and check out those green eyes too. And this figure actually has an action button. When you move the tail, it chomps its jaw open and closed. Last of all, we've got a Gallimimus figure. This dinosaur is a soft brown color and it has some darker brown striping along the top, and you can move its head up and down as well as its other limbs too. This figure is ginormous. I think it might be one of the largest Predator figures that I have in my Jurassic World collection, aside from these super colossal figures. And it's also got these action buttons on its back. One for slashing the claws, and one to activate the jaws. How cool is that? Plus, there's even lights down its throat that you can kind of see on the outside too. Next up, we've got a massive Spinosaurus figure. This figure is the light tan with the dark brown and red along the spine. It is very poseable, and its neck is very movable, which is really cool. Plus, there's a button on the top of its head to activate the jaw. And check out all those teeth, too. Right over here is our first prey of the bin. This is a Triceratops figure with the dark green coloring. It's got some brown detailing along the top and on the front as well. And this figure actually has 2 action buttons on its back. One is to lift the head up and down for striking with those awesome horns, and the second button swings the tail back and forth. I bet that would hurt if you got hit by this in real life too. Next up, another predator, the mighty Tyrannosaurus Rex with the gray-brown coloring and the dark brown on top. This figure is very poseable as well. It's got a decent amount of detailing in the coloring. I like how they fade from the dark brown to the gray-brown coloring. And of course, it's got the button on the top of its head to activate the jaw. Here is another T-Rex predator. This figure is the Stomp and Escape T-Rex. This one has some very different detailing than the T-Rex that we just saw. It's got these splotches all over its back with the lighter underbelly and the darker coloring right around its eyes too. And this figure has 2 action buttons. The first one is for the roaring. That's really cool how it lifts its whole neck up. And the second action is actually when you twist the tails, it stomps its feet up and down with sound effects. Here's a small prey from Camp Cretaceous. This is the gray and dark purple Brachiosaurus. It's actually a baby Brachiosaurus, but it's still quite movable and poseable. You can move the neck, the legs, and you can even open and close the jaw too. So even though it's pretty small, it's still a pretty cool figure. On to another Predator figure. This figure was made famous by the first Jurassic World movie. This is a Mosasaurus, and this figure is huge. And it's even larger in real life as well compared to the other dinosaurs. It's got this dark blue body with white splotches all over. You can open and close the jaw, you can move all the fins, and you can even swing the tail back and forth too. Right here, we've got, I believe this is the Rowdy Roars Carnotaurus figure. So it's kind of funny because it looks almost like a baby Carnotaurus. It's got these huge feet and a huge head, and then this small body. Plus, it actually comes with a few actions as well. There's a button at the bottom of its tail for the chomping. It's pretty cool. You can see it swings its neck forward. And there's also a button on the top of its head for blinking and more sound effects. Right over here is another Carnotaurus Predator figure. This one has the light gray coloring on the underbelly and that same orange-red coloring on its side and the brown on top. Of course, it's got those iconic horns at the top of its head, those yellow eyes, and it has a few action features as well. You can open and close the mouth using a button on its tail, and you can twist its head in all directions to look really lifelike. Next up, I've actually got some brand new Camp Cretaceous sets that we're gonna open up right now. Let's check out this first one. This is the Ben and Ankylosaurus Bumpy set from the Dino Escape. It looks a little opened up already, but I think it still has most of the pieces. Let's check it out. See the spear over here? And let's go ahead and get Ben out of here and check him out. All right, so the Ben figure actually comes with this awesome little shield and this spear that he can hold. Plus, the figure itself has some pretty cool detailing. The figure looks dirty as if it's been in the jungle and in the wild, so pretty lifelike. And of course, we've got the cute little Ankylosaurus Bumpy with the iconic blue coloring on the top and the yellow underbelly. And even though this figure is pretty small, you can even twist the tail around and adjust that, and move the legs and twist the neck around too. So there's a lot that you can move around on this figure. I've got one more brand new Camp Cretaceous set to open up. This is the Camp Adventure set. All right, this set comes with 4 figurines. The first is this giant Stegosaurus figure, which is a prey dinosaur, and it's got the gray-blue body with the darker coloring right along the top. You can move the neck around a little bit, you can adjust all the legs, and it has an action button that swings its tail back and forth. Next in the set, we've got a Baryonyx figure. That's really cool. I have a few other Baryonyx figures like this. This one has the light green coloring along most of its body, and then it has the dark brown detailing along some of its leg and along the top as well, while its head is a lighter brown color. Plus, there is an action button on its back to activate the jaw. Next in the set, we've got Darius with the iconic yellow sweater and the blue pants. This figure even has the dinosaur tooth necklace around their neck. How cool is that? And last of all, and smallest of all, is another Ankylosaurus Bumpy figure. This figure is super small though, and actually none of the parts move. Oh, you know what? The tail moves back and forth. How cool is that? But that's the only part that moves on this teeny tiny figure. All right, back to the bin. Let's see what other predators and preys we have. We've got another giant T-Rex figure with the light brown coloring on the side and darker brown on the top. You can wiggle the tail around, you can adjust the ankles and move the legs, and of course it's got the button on the top of its head to activate the jaws. I really like with these figures how you can pose their neck in all directions and it actually stays looking in that direction. Right over here, we've got two prey figures of the same species. These are both Triceratops. You can tell because they have the 3 horns on the front of their face. This first one is a lot larger and has the clay red coloring and one action button on its back to move its head up and down. And the smaller Triceratops figure is a light green in color, and this figure has a really cool feature on the side of its body, which is the battle damage that you can open and close. I really like these because you can choose to hide the battle damage or open it up and show it. We've got more awesome predator figures in here. This is the Albertosaurus with the green body and the orange detailing on the side. And this figure, you can use the tail to twist the head back and forth, as well as open and close the jaw. Here is an Allosaurus figure, and I've actually got a few more Allosaurus figures in here, so let's check these out one at a time. This first one is a dark green color. It's got some red and white detailing right along its neck and its head. It's got those dark red eyes, which I think is really cool. And this figure has the slide lever action to open the jaw and get a bunch of sound effects too. This next Allosaurus figure is gray and light yellow. You can move all the limbs on this one. This one has some yellow eyes, and it has one action button on its back to activate the jaws. And here is the final Allosaurus of the bin. This is a brown and dark blue Allosaurus. It looks very much the same as the other figures. It's got the yellow eyes on this figure, as well as the spikes going down its neck, and the slide lever action for different roar sound effects, and a bunch of different poses too. Here's another prey figure. This is a Sauropelta. It has the bright red top and the brown underbelly and those super huge spikes coming out of its shoulders. It's got a whole row. It's actually got 2 rows on each side. And this figure is actually spring-loaded, so you can swing it back and forth to attack with those spikes. Next up, we've got another Rowdy Roars figure. This is an Indominus Rex. It looks very much the same as the Rowdy Roars Carnotaurus. It's got the big feet, the giant head, and the small body, and it actually has some actions as well. You can use the tail to open the jaw, and then you can press on the tongue to snap it shut. And there is a button on its nose as well to activate more sound effects. I've got some smaller prey in here as well. Check out these Gallimimus figures. They look pretty identical, but this one is a darker orange coloring with brown stripes, and this one is much lighter. And they both have the same movements. You can move all the limbs, you can twist the tail, and you can move the necks up and down as well. Next up, I believe, is the Ceratosaurus figure. This figure is gray, it's got some dark brown, and then the bright red along its back, which is a really cool color scheme, I think. It's got the action button on its back to activate the jaw as well. Here is our first winged predator of the bin. This is a Pteranodon, and this one actually has some battle damage on its wings. You can see that there's a hole in its wing right there. Plus, you can actually open up more battle damage right on its back. Looks like I've got a few more Baryonyx figures in here as well. This first one is another light green with the brown detailing along the top. It's got the action button on its back for chomping. And I've also got this battle damage Baryonyx as well. This one is a darker red color with some blue detailing on the top. It's got a lighter color along the top of its head, and you can see the battle damage on its neck, on its leg, and it looks like that's about it. But it also has an action button to activate the jaw as well. Next up is another prey from Camp Cretaceous. This is the Stegosaurus with the brown, light tan, and green coloring. It's very much similar to the Stegosaurus that we saw earlier, including an action button to swing its tail back and forth, but this one actually has another feature that when you press down here, it moves its neck up and down. The next predator is a Carnotaurus in the bright red coloring with the brown detailing and the light orange along its head and its nose as well. This figure also has the action button on its back to activate the jaw. Right over here, we've got a Pachycephalosaurus figurine. This is light tan along the sides, it's a bit brighter along its belly, and it has the dark gray-blue detailing along its top and on its legs too. Plus, this figure has an action button that when you move the tail, it does the headbutting action. So this figure is actually spring-loaded. All right, check it out. We've got a few raptor figures in here. Velociraptors to be exact. This first one is the green Velociraptor. It is in a sneaking pose. It's crawling along the ground, looking for some prey. And I've also got this blue Velociraptor with some awesome detailing and even the gold on the top of its head. That's a really cool feature. I think this is my only Velociraptor with reflective gold on its head. Next up, I've got a few Monolophosaurus figures in here, all with different coloring. This first one is super bright green. It's got the darker green along the top and an action button. When you push down on the tail, it opens and closes its jaw. I've also got these other Monolophosaurus. This one is like a light red color with almost purple coloring along its back, and it also has the action button to open and close its jaw. And this Monolophosaurus is dark green with some bright yellow and red coloring along the top, and it also has the action button to open and close its jaw using the tail. Here we've got a few more prey figures from Camp Cretaceous. This first one is a Stygimoloch figure and is really small, but it's still quite posable. You can move the head in all directions, you can twist the tail and move the limbs. And this figure, I believe, is the Protoceratops. It's got the light purple body with some brighter yellow coloring along the top and on the front as well. And it's got some bright yellow eyes too. Looks like we've got two more winged predators in here. These both, I believe, are Dimorphodons. This first one is a lot brighter. It's got like some fire detailing on the underside of its wings, and the rest of its body is a darker red. And this figure has some purplish coloring along the underside of its wings, while the rest of its body is a gray color. Just a few small figures left. We've got another Gallimimus figure, this one with different coloring. It actually has yellow and brown striping along its back, all the way up to its head. I've also got, I think this is a Troodon figure. It's kind of funny because it looks like it's got a mohawk, but those are actually just the spines going all the way down its back. It's got some cool coloring as well. And then, of course, I've got a Dilophosaurus figure with the light coloring along its body and the red along its frills. Plus, this figure has an action that when you move the tail, its frills activate. And last of all, I've got some of the Camp Cretaceous human character figurines. We've even got Darius again, we've got Brooklyn, and all these figures, each with their own unique looks. This is the Isla Sorna capture pack. Let's go ahead and open it up. All right, here is our Jurassic World Jeep and the Parasaurolophus. With this Jeep, there's actually a button you can press that shoots out the seat. And then you can see that there's a missile that it shoots too, just like this. That's super cool. This is a super awesome dino hunting playset. Really cool. All right, up next, we've got a Jurassic World Legacy Collection Velociraptor. Let's get this out of the box. All right, so here is the brand new Velociraptor. I don't think I actually have a Velociraptor with this type of coloring. Plus, this Velociraptor has a slashing action with its torso. Look at that spinning motion. That is so cool. It's spring-loaded, so it bounces back and forth. That is really awesome. All right, up next, we've got the Pachycephalosaurus. I love the coloring on this one. It's got that dark blue with the gray. Let's get this out of the box. This is a super cool herbivore. You definitely don't want to get headbutted by this dinosaur. Check out this action move. Spring-loaded head. That is so awesome. And right back here, we've got the Cosmoceratops. That is so interesting. Look at all the horns all over this one's body. Let's get it out of the box. Wow, I love the way this dinosaur looks. It looks like it's wearing a crown almost. And look at the horns on the side too. And this dinosaur has an action as well. Check that out. When you wiggle the tail, the head goes up and down. How cool is that? All right, I know you've been looking at this one. This is a giant Velociraptor. Look how big this figure is. It's probably, I don't know, maybe 3 feet from tail to head. And it's actually pretty heavy too. This dinosaur has a stomach compartment right here. So you can actually feed this dinosaur littler dinosaurs or whatever you want, and it'll go down the throat all the way into the stomach where you can open it up and get those toys out again. That is so awesome. And look at the size of these claws too. Right in the back here, we've got the great Tyrannosaurus Rex. Look at the size of this dinosaur. Look at the size of its body. That is a huge neck and face. And of course, there's the action button for roaring. That is so cool. There's so many teeth in its mouth. And of course, you can wiggle the tail and it'll move its head back and forth. Up next, with a super long neck, we've got the awesome Brachiosaurus. Look at that interesting bump on its head right there. That is so cool. This figure doesn't have any movable parts, but it is super realistic with its coloring and its texture. That is so cool. And one of the next huge dinosaurs in this haul, the great Indominus Rex with battle damage. Look at all those teeth and the awesome battle damage on the side that you can turn on and turn off. There we go. Right up here, we've got a Stegosaurus with a gray-blue coloring. Look at that tail swiping action. That is so cool. And you can adjust the head too. Here's one of my favorite dinosaurs, the Carnotaurus. That is super awesome. It's got a little battle damage on its head. And with the tail, you can move the head. Here's what I think is one of the scariest predators in Jurassic World. This is the Scorpius Rex. It's got loads of teeth in its mouth, super sharp claws, and look at this poisonous tail. Those quills on its tail are poisonous, so you better watch out for those. Here is a super bright dinosaur. This is a predator. It is the Suchomimus. Look at that long mouth with all those teeth. Kind of like an alligator, really. And look at that fin all along its back right there. Right over here is an herbivore. This is the Ankylosaurus. And look at all that armor plating. Here is a scary looking predator. Look at that red all along its neck. This is the Carcharodontosaurus. This is a super cool looking dinosaur. See all those spikes along its back? That is super awesome. Right over here, this predator looks kind of like an alligator too. This is the Sarcophagus with all those teeth in its mouth and this red scaling all along its back and then the green bottom. All right, we've got a bunch more predators and herbivores in here. These two are both Carnotaurus, and look at the difference in coloring too. I think this one's my favorite because I love this orange right along the top of its body. But these are both super cool dinosaurs. Right over here, we've got another herbivore, and look at the horns on this. It kind of reminds me of the horns of a bull, kind of. This is a Nasutoceratops, and it's got an action button in the back. It can whip its tail back and forth. That is super awesome. And it's got a button on the top for swinging its horns around too. Watch out for those horns. All right, let's keep digging. Ooh, this is an interesting looking herbivore. This is a Calavosaurus. I love the coloring on this. Got the yellow on the top and the dark blue on the sides. And you can move the head up and down and the tail and all the legs too. Uh-oh, better watch out. Here's another predator. It's the Baryonyx. This is super cool. Check out that chomping action. Here is another herbivore. This is a very uniquely colored dinosaur. This is a Zuniceratops, and it kind of reminds me of a Triceratops, you know? See those two horns in the front right there? That is super cool. We've got some smaller herbivores in here. Let's check these out. Wow, these are all so different from each other. This is a Chialingosaurus. And look at those spikes on its shoulder too. How interesting is that? This little one right here is a Protoceratops. It looks very small, and it might be a young Protoceratops, but it is super cool. This orange dinosaur is a Gallimimus. Look at that long neck and the long tail. I bet these dinosaurs ran really fast. And this little dinosaur is a Triceratops. See, got the 3 horns on its head right there. But wait, we've got some more predators in here. Look out, it's the Indoraptor, one of the sneakiest and smartest dinosaurs out there. Let's check out these. This is a baby Brachiosaurus. You can open and close its mouth and move its neck up and down. And this is another giant Stegosaurus. It's got that tail swinging action. Those spikes are super big. Wow, that is so neat. Here comes another predator. This is the Spinosaurus. Look at that huge spine along its back, and then all those teeth right up front. All right, we've got a few more dinosaurs in here. This huge dinosaur figure is a Pentaceratops. And check out these action buttons. Those are some massive horns on its head. Right back here, we've got another Parasaurolophus. And this is an older one. This is actually from Jurassic Park. And it's got a running action too. How cool is that? Super cool. We've got just a few dinosaurs left. This dinosaur is called a Sinoceratops. And look at the size of that one horn on its head in the very front. That is humongous. All right, here's another predator. This is a bright red and green velociraptor with jumping action. Check that out. Here he goes, ready, and go. All right, these are our final 3 dinosaurs of the Predator versus Herbivore collection. This is a Styracosaurus, and look at all those horns. That is super cool. This interesting looking one is a Shringosaurus. Look at those huge horns right on the top of its head and the super long neck. How interesting is that? And our final dinosaur of the bin is the mighty Carnotaurus with those huge spikes on its side. And if you pull this lever right here, it swings its spikes back and forth. And to start it off, we're gonna start with this old Jurassic Park T-Rex figure. This T-Rex figure has the real feel skin, so it's actually rubber instead of hard plastic. And when you press on the stomach, it opens and closes its mouth, although it doesn't work too well anymore. It's pretty old. And our first prey is this Dino Tracker's Stegosaurus. This is one of my newest Stegosaurus figures. It has this awesome backpack. There's some pretty cool coloring and detailing all over its body too. For the next mighty T-Rex, we're gonna go with this bright orange one, I believe from Fallen Kingdom. This figure features posable arms and legs, and you can use the tail for a roaring action or for a chomping action. This is one of the few dinosaur figures that has this type of chomping action. For our next prey, we're gonna go with the Amargosaurus figure. This dinosaur stands on all four legs, it has the super long neck, and these two really tall spine or frill things running down its neck all the way to its tail, and has an action button to move its neck and to move its tail too. This T-Rex figure is from the most recent Jurassic World movie, which was Dominion. It has the darker brown body with the black top, it has posable arms and legs, and on this figure you can move the tail side to side to move its torso and to open and close its jaw. Our next predator is actually another carnivore. This is the Baryonyx figure, and this one specifically has the bright orange paint on the top of its head. But let me know in the comments, do you think that T-Rexes hunted Baryonyxes? Back to the T-Rex side, we've got a T-Rex from the original Jurassic World movie. And like many figures from that movie, this figure is actually made by Hasbro, not Mattel, who makes all the new figures today. This figure has some sound effects. You can pose it in a roaring pose, and you can move its tail down for a chomping action. For the next prey, we've got an Iguanodon figure. I believe this one is also from Jurassic World Dominion. It's a medium-sized figure and it actually has an action. When you press down on its back, it chomps its head. This next T-Rex I got very recently. This is actually a custom painted T-Rex figure. You can see right here that it is also a battle damage T-Rex that you can still turn on and off, which is pretty awesome, and I love this camo coloring. This prey herbivore figure is the Hammond Collection Triceratops. Unlike many of the other Triceratops figures, this one has much more natural coloring. It does have a lighter underbelly, and there's some detailing along its face. I really love the detail on its horns. It makes it look really worn. Up next for the T-Rexes is actually another custom painted T-Rex that I got probably a few weeks ago. This figure is called, I think it's like the Terran T-Rex or something like that, and it has an action button on its back that you can use for the tearing action, and another button on its back to move the tail too. And this custom paint job has a much more realistic look, I think. You can see different shades of brown, and then of course it has the lighter underbelly. But the coolest part, I think, are all the battle damage slashes that the artist added onto this figure. So I think this is a lot more battle damage than this Terran T-Rex originally had. I think this next unusual dinosaur could also have been prey for T-Rex dinosaurs. This is a Sarcosuchus, and I believe there's two different versions of this figure. And this one has the green body with the brown on the top, and of course the super long jaw that you can open and close with a button on its tail. This T-Rex figure is a dark green color, and one of the only few, I think, that is naturally dark green. This was not custom painted. Its arms and legs and tail are posable like many of the other figures, and it has a button on the top of its head for the chomping action. Our next prey is an Ankylosaurus. This figure, I think, is from the Camp Cretaceous series, and it features the clay red underbelly and then the brown armoring on top with the tan spikes. And this figure features an attack action when you press down on its back. Back to the T-Rex side, we've got the Camp Cretaceous Epic Roarin' T-Rex. I think this T-Rex figure might actually be a little bit larger than many of the other T-Rex figures, and it features the movable arms and legs, and by moving the tail, you can move the T-Rex's head and open and close the jaw. Next up for the prey, I've got another Stegosaurus figure. This one is quite a bit older. It features the blue-green coloring on the sides. It's got a lighter yellow underbelly. And like many of the Stegosaurus figures, it has an attack button when you press down on one of its spines. Here's another battle damage T-Rex. This figure, kind of like the custom painted Terran T-Rex, has battle damage painted on its body, some on its neck, a little bit on its chin, and elsewhere on its body too. And other than that, you can move its arms, you can adjust its legs and its tail, and it has the button at the top of the head for roaring. Back to the prey side, we've got, I believe, a Sinoceratops. This figure is in the light blue-gray coloring. It's also got some bright yellow and orange coloring on the front of its face. And by moving the tail, you can move the head, and it has sound effects too. These next two T-Rexes are a bit smaller in size than many of the other ones. This first one here is the Sound Surge T-Rex that came out for Jurassic World Dominion. And it's pretty small and it's a hard plastic compared to this Jurassic Park. I believe it's a juvenile T-Rex, and this figure has the real feel skin, so almost its whole body is this soft rubber. And this figure has some epic battle damage on its side, but no sound effects. However, the Sound Surge obviously does have sound effects. For our next prey figure, we're gonna go with one that might be a little controversial. It is a Velociraptor. Do you think that T-Rexes hunted Velociraptors? This figure is the basic Velociraptor, so you can pose its tail, its legs, and its arms, but it doesn't come with any sound effects or attack buttons. Next up for the T-Rexes is a figure that is very special to me. This is a Stomp and Escape T-Rex that I custom painted myself. And let's actually compare this painting with the original version. So here is the original paint job. You can see that it's mostly brown and it has some gray detailing along the top of its body. And compare that with what I did. So it still has a lot of brown on the top, but it's got this really nice green color running all the way up to its face. And then of course the bright yellow underbelly. I think it's pretty cool, and it is one of the figures I am the most proud of. The next prey figure is another scary looking carnivore, but it still might have been hunted by the T-Rex. This is the Suchomimus figure, and I think there are two different versions of this figure. This one is in the blue with the yellow detailing running down its spine, and it has one action button for the chomping action. Next, let's go ahead and open up this brand new one that I bought for this video. This is the Jurassic World Legacy Collection Extreme Chompin' T-Rex. All right, here it is. It's another bright orange T-Rex with the darker brown on top and the light underbelly. It has the posable arms, it's got the posable legs, and the tail as well. And you can actually move the neck and head around quite a lot too. But don't forget, it also has the chomping button on the top of its head. Our next prey is another Triceratops figure. I believe that this one is from Jurassic World Dominion, and it has some unusual colors on it. There's this soft green color in the back, and then it has this more swampy green color running up all the way to its face, and it has the orange on the top of its frill too. And this figure features an attack button when you press down on its body. This next T-Rex is an extreme battle damage T-Rex. It has the light underbelly with brown on the sides and then the gray detailing on the top. And I think this T-Rex might have been what this originally looked like. So check out those differences in the coloring now. They look totally different. For our next prey, we've got another Iguanodon figure, but this one actually came out quite recently. I believe it was released as a pack with a Scorpiovenator figure. And this Iguanodon has the light tan on the sides with the darker brown on top, and it has an attack button when you press down on its back. Our next T-Rex is the Mighty Bull T-Rex from Jurassic Park. You can see the leg tattoo right there. And like many of the older figures, this has the real feel skin, so it's a soft rubber over most of its body. And something that's pretty unique for the older Jurassic Park figures, this T-Rex can actually swallow smaller dinosaurs. And you can see the stomach compartment right there. This prey figure is the Herrerasaurus, and I believe this dinosaur is also a carnivore, but I think it was plenty small enough to be hunted by T-Rexes. And this Herrerasaurus figure features the battle damage on the side that you can open and close. Next, let's grab this huge super colossal T-Rex that's been hanging out in the back. This figure is also a custom colored T-Rex, and it is now in the dark green coloring with the black striping along the top. This figure might be one of my oldest super colossal figures. It definitely has a lot of wear and tear to it. Next up for the prey, I've got a small Parasaurolophus figure. Now it doesn't have any action buttons, but you can still pose its arms, its legs, its tail, and of course its head. And here's another classic T-Rex figure with a light brown and dark brown along the top, and a fully posable body, and the jaw-chomping action. For our final prey and dinosaur of this collection is a baby Brachiosaurus figure. This one comes in a few different versions, and this is the light green on the sides and the dark green along the top.
Want to see more dino videos? Click the subscribe button now.